At this point in the graduation exercises, Washington Lee's tradition privileges us with the opportunity to hear from the president of the student body. Richard Cleary is from Louisville, Kentucky. He majored in politics and French and is a member of Phi Beta Kappa and Omicron Delta Kappa. Just a few weeks ago, at the invitation of none other than the French government, he attended a conference in France on nuclear power and security, an experience which no doubt informed his senior thesis on nuclear energy policy. After graduation, he will again fly back over the ocean to seek a master's degree in international relations at Cambridge University. His list of leadership roles goes well beyond his position as president of the student body and are too numerous to mention here. Let me say simply that he is one of the most capable, intelligent, and principled student leaders I've had the privilege to work with during my time in higher education. He is destined for great things. Rich, we look forward to your comments.
Thank you, President Ruscio, for your introduction and for inviting me to speak today before the assembled members of the Class of 2009 Board of Trustees, faculty and staff, and guests. My name is Richard Cleary, and I've had the honor of serving as the President of the Executive Committee of the student body this past year. I would like to welcome all of my classmates, their families and friends, convened for this signal and exciting moment. As you know, at Washington & Lee, it is customary for a student, rather than a holder of public office or some other nationally recognized figure, to address his classmates and those gathered to honor the graduates. These speakers of national stature are chosen for their insight, accrued from a successful life, that they might bring to a graduating class, as well as for the prestige that their visit might direct to a particular university. Here at Washington & Lee, we enjoy a different tradition, leaving me with the daunting task of doing justice to the Legion accomplishments of the class of 2009 during our years in Lexington. The attainments of our class range from the individual to the collective, with recognition coming from the local level to national and international institutions. Our class has thrown itself into extracurricular undertakings with vigor, excelling on the athletic fields, in artistic productions, and in leadership positions in a host of clubs. We owe many of the hallmarks of our college experience, mock convention, fancy dress, Buffalo Creek, the oversight of the honor system, to the hard work and dedication of our fellow students. As we prepare to go forth from Lexington, the class of 2009 is acutely aware that many of the most meaningful moments are ones that are intangible. They include climbing House Mountain with friends, shooting the breeze around a campfire on Windfall Hill, floating down the Maury River, and lounging on the green sloping hill in front of Lee Chapel. Orientation week freshman year, our first spring term, and our last parents' weekend are memories that will stay with us forever. Our experience in the classroom has prepared us for the world we enter, and underlying our academic success is the dedication of faculty and staff who support, encourage, and draw out the best in us. Profound concern for student success, mastery of, and zeal for the subject matter characterize faculty at Washington & Lee. Perhaps the most meaningful aspect of our academic experience will be the personal relationships formed with faculty members. Each of us can remember the time we visited a professor's office with a specific question, only to leave an hour later after talking about everything from points of interest in the subject matter to summer plans and career aspirations. Dinners at professors' homes and meetings after class to discuss pending papers are commonplace. The empathy of professors in assisting students in the preparation of work and in granting extensions when appropriate is especially appreciated. In the current economic downturn, professors have been willing to help us in positioning ourselves for careers. I would be remiss if I did not mention the honor system, the central tenet of our time at Washington and Lee, something that has defined and distinguished our college experience. Just as we can recall time spent with professors, so too can we provide examples where we left laptops overnight in the library, backpacks outside of the D Hall, completed take-home tests, took exams days after our roommates without discussing them, or gave the tough answer to professors or DCs when asked. The twin aspects of the community of trust, on one side the benefits we enjoy, and on the other the rigorous standard to which we hold ourselves, are present in these anecdotes. The transition for many of us from high school to college was marked by awe at the utopian ethos of this place, which appeals to our better angels. This is a place where character is expected, and in the words of James Q. Wilson, where character counts. The honor system, anomalous in higher education, is essential to the unusual educational model put forward by Washington and Lee. This paradigm accounts for the development of the whole person, producing an alumnus disposed not only to thinking clearly and critically, but also to making ethical decisions. The honor system, it must be added, is not one simply of self-preservation. Present in its core is a regard for others and the impact of one's choices on those around him or her. The attendant traditions of respect and civility testify to the other regarding aspect of the honor system. Returning to Washington and Lee's educational model, it is one that invokes a seminal concept of Western philosophical tradition, arete, loosely translated as virtue. For Aristotle, there were two species of virtue, an intellectual one and a moral one, both cultivated by habit. The members of the philosophy department will forgive me for my rude and incomplete treatment of the subject, but I do think that this concept is useful because of its pertinence to our experience at Washington and Lee, where education is not limited to the simple assimilation of facts and figures, or even the sophisticated evaluation and analysis of the great liberal arts subjects. Education extends to the development of a sense of self inside and outside of the classroom. And in true Aristotelian fashion, it is habit forming. After 4 years, in addition to the academic requirements enumerated by the registrar, a more profound obligation to the honor system has been met. The example of alumni illustrates the lifelong influence of the ethical virtue we adopt during our 4 years in Lexington. In a recent visit to campus, former Senator John Warner, a W&L alumnus, recalled a Senate ethics hearing, the consequence of which, in the case of a finding of misconduct, would be dismissal from this sacred body. The senator described the moment. I remember I was sitting next to one colleague, and I could see the angst in his face, and I could feel the sorrow in the faces of all of them when they have to do these duties. And this man uttered, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." And I said to myself, I wouldn't have said that. There, but for the grace of God, I will never go, because I'm a graduate of Washington and Lee and of the honor system. That system has given me enormous strength throughout my public life. It is an intangible, which is so vital as these young people leave this university and go out into this tumultuous world, a world that is far more complicated and challenging and dangerous than the world that I entered in 1949 when I left this great university. We go forth into a world that is, to say the least, uncertain, with crisis at home and abroad. Our completion of the requirements of this institution indicates not only an intellectual capacity to meet these challenges, it also signals that we are men and women of character, that we emerge from Lexington equipped to deal with what President Ruscio has called the complex moral challenges and questions of our day. The values of Washington and Lee are not something to be taken for granted, however. The honor system relies on the sustained dedication of students, especially those in a position of direct involvement in the judicial branch of the system, as well as the active support of administration and faculty. As alumni, we have a special obligation to this place. Our first responsibility will be the maintenance in our own lives of these habits formed at W&L. Second, as alumni, we must work with those on campus to uphold these fundamental values. Before I come to a close, I would like to thank President Ruscio for his leadership. It is reassuring to know that we are leaving Washington and Lee with President Ruscio at the helm, a person who has, in the tradition of Robert E. Lee, dedicated himself completely to this institution. President Ruscio's understanding of Washington and Lee, as well as his thoughtfulness, balance, and ability to appreciate both the big picture and the smaller components that make it up, make him an exemplary steward for our soon-to-be alma mater. We also owe a debt of gratitude to our families for all their support, sacrifice, and love, which they have provided so that we can enjoy these years at Washington and Lee to the fullest. I would especially like to recognize and thank our parents. Today, like the songwriter of Shenandoah, the song we have heard so many times during our years in Lexington, we will leave this place. Like him who mourned his separation from this valley, we will guard our memories of this place with zeal. As this writer recognized, departure from Lexington does not mitigate its effect on us. Leaving the Shenandoah does not erase the friendships formed here, the values instilled, or the intellect harnessed. Whenever we talk to an old friend, email a former professor, or display resolve in the face of a world fraught with moral hazard, we will be back. So let us enjoy today, knowing that we too shall carry with us an indelible and perpetual memory of this place, which has become a part of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich, for your good words and your good work this year. As Rich mentioned, we do have a little bit of a tradition here of commencement speakers being a little bit different than in other colleges. The other part of the story is not that we do this out of some very lofty principle, but really to solve a problem that occurred many years ago when an elderly speaker back in the 1920s or 30s approached the podium with a stack of index cards and went through them not once, not twice, but 3 times. I believe I hear some drops falling out there. Let me, before I get into what may become my briefer remarks than I had planned, note that we are going to try to endure a short shower, a light rainfall. The graduates should pull out their ponchos. In the event of more severe rain, a sudden downpour, we do have a backup plan to get you your diplomas. I'm not going to go through them now, but if I have to, I will. This could be the start of a tradition with no commencement speech whatsoever. Whoever applauded may now exit. Well, I'm going to forge on. Last year, fittingly, a few days after commencement, I received a charming, handwritten, 2-page letter from the grandmother of one of our graduates. This is the abridged version. President Ruscio, it began, I wanted you to know the ceremony was beautiful and meaningful, a memorable event for everyone. However, last year, it was very hot and sunny, and very hot, especially for the graduates. And the grandmother went on, I have a few suggestions. You could build an awning to protect them from the sun. I understand, though, that may not be feasible, so I have a couple of additional thoughts. Rather than having each graduate walk across the stage, they could stand as one and pick up their diplomas later. But that may go against your tradition of individual recognition. So my final suggestion is this: you could shorten your remarks. My theme last year was civility, and I was pleased that it took my correspondent 2 polite pages to get to her real reason for writing. Still, as you can tell, I've summarily rejected her first 2 suggestions, but I will take them much more seriously into account next year. And it will remain to be seen how I will deal with her third, but I think I'm going to make it even briefer than I had intended. I want to give first words of praise to you, and then a challenge. You are an outstanding group of young men and women, among the best I have known. Your parents left you here 4 years ago with evident and justifiable pride in what you had already accomplished, and with hope and perhaps a touch of anxiety for what might lie ahead. You have fulfilled their hopes and eased their anxiety. Think back to when you first met in Lee Chapel. You didn't know it then, but you were among future winners of Fulbright fellowships and classmates who would be honored with membership in Phi Beta Kappa and Omicron Delta Kappa. There was an editor of the Ring Tum Phi and a future EC president within your ranks, a few fraternity and sorority presidents, some who would venture into the community to address problems of poverty, and others who would call attention to women's issues here on campus. Your musical, theatrical, and artistic talents were not apparent to us then, but they certainly are now, and we have enjoyed your creative contributions these many years. Each of you has achieved in ways you never imagined, perhaps by receiving a hoped-for but unexpected grade from a tough professor, or perhaps by just passing a course you feared would be your downfall. In countless ways, some known only to you alone, and some well known to all of us, you have done well, and you have every reason to be proud. And just as you were unsure in the unfamiliar setting of Lee Chapel 4 years ago how success would reveal itself, so do you sit here today, not knowing precisely what the future holds, but confident that among you are scientists who will make great discoveries, doctors who will save lives, attorneys who will represent individuals when they need it the most, politicians who will change the world, teachers who will change the lives of young people, business leaders who will serve society with their innovative and ethical spirit, meteorologists who will predict the weather precisely. Last month, I met with alumni from the class of 1959, returning to campus for their 50th reunion. They had such dignity, such a sense of lives well lived, such admiration for each other and what they had accomplished. They heard, as Rich noted, from former Senator John Warner, class of 1949, here for his 60th reunion. They also saw former W&L professor Bill Jenks, class of 1939, here for his 70th reunion. There was, understandably, a smaller turnout from Professor Jenks's class, but he represented them well. His august presence alone sent the clear message that their legacy of excellence and honor is now yours and mine to uphold. You will return here someday to meet as they did, and you will look back upon this graduation moment fondly. They fulfilled their promise, and just as surely you will fulfill yours. Now for the challenge. It is this college's burden to offer not just an education, but a particular kind of education. We send you into the world with a keen intellect, but also with a sensitivity to the demands of character. It is part of our institutional DNA. George Washington was a man of strong intelligence, but the foundation of his greatness was judgment, and the foundation of his judgment was character. We forget, or at least understate, his connection to this university. His decision to donate James River Canal stock to Liberty Hall Academy means, quite simply, that you are able to be here today. By today's standards, as Reverend Strawbridge mentioned yesterday, that gift of about $20,000 worth of stock seems small. It wasn't small then, and the endowment it established not only saved the institution, but bolsters the university's finances to this very day. As the eminent historian Gordon Wood has explained, Washington's decision to donate that stock provides one of the clearest glimpses into the heart of the first president. He was greatly conflicted when the company offered him the stock. Of course, he could not keep it for himself. Personal gain from serving the public good was outside the code of gentlemen. But neither was it gentlemanly to embarrass a sincerely motivated giver by refusing the gift. Washington agonized over what to do. He wrote for his advice to all his contemporaries, Madison, Hamilton, and Jefferson among them. Gordon Wood notes wryly that it would have been comical had Washington not been so serious. Washington wanted to avoid, in his own words, an ostentatious display of disinterestedness. Wearing moral sensitivity on his sleeve was not part of his character. We are the happy beneficiaries of his ethical dilemma, but the price we pay is the obligation to send graduates into the world fully aware that they, too, will face lives of difficult moral choices. So before handing you your diplomas, one way or the other, let me make one final calibration of your moral compasses. This is the message. Do not enter this morally complex world with a simplistic moral approach. That seems obvious, but it is more challenging than you imagine. Modern culture will tempt you to seek simple answers where there are none. I worry a lot these days about the state of public discourse. It leaves a lot to be desired. We are apparently unable to disagree respectfully. We mistake the harshness of one's rhetoric for the depth of one's convictions. Decibel levels do not correlate with the quality of one's reasoning. Certitude is not the same as clarity. Stridency is not the same as sincerity. Yet we cede public platforms too often to those who are certain they have it all figured out and who seek to prevail rather than persuade. Their positions are reflexive impulses from political ideology or mistakenly simplified religious doctrine or fashionable academic theories. Those who rest on such comfortable beds of dogma, says Isaiah Berlin, are victims of self-induced myopia, blinkers that may make for contentment, but not for understanding what it is to be human. It is intellectually lazy to seek the path of least complication, and one symptom of this laziness is first to caricature the positions of those who think differently, and then to personalize the disagreement by labeling those with whom you disagree as unreasonable, not rational, and morally deficient. Viewing the world in shades only of black and white is a form of moral colorblindness, although it makes for an easy life. You won't have to think as much or work as hard. You could, sadly, become the character depicted in Joseph O'Connor's novel, Star of the Sea, the kind of radical who is secretly relieved that injustices exist, morality being so easily attainable by saying you found them outrageous. Let me leave you with this image. I have in mind a Washington Elite graduate entering the arena of public debate. Off to one side is a cacophony of voices, loud and harsh. On the other side are the silent ones, racked by self-doubt, who avoid the great issues of our time. It would be easy to gravitate to one or the other. But I wish for you a more difficult life, somewhere in that complicated center, where the courage of your convictions blends with humility and respect for others. It will make for a challenging but a fulfilling and meaningful life for yourselves and those whose lives you will surely touch. You have the best wishes of the faculty, of the staff, and the 25,000 alumni whose ranks you will join. And you have my own sincere wishes for a life well lived. With congratulations and appreciation, I wish you the very, very best. Thank you. We come now to the point in our program, quickly, when we customarily recognize outstanding individuals whose lives we hold up to you as examples of how you should live yours, whose records of achievement and personal character exemplify this institution's highest ideals. At this year's law school commencement held earlier, we awarded an honorary degree to Lord Chief Justice Nicholas Addison Phillips. Today, we will bestow honorary doctorates on 3 other outstanding individuals. Will the University Registrar escort Dr. Charles Johnson to the front of the podium? I now recognize Provost June Aprilli, who will read the honorary degree citations.
Dr. Charles Richard Johnson is one of the most important intellectuals of our time, a prolific writer, a lifelong educator, a significant visual artist, and a philosopher who shines a light on American culture. Dr. Johnson holds the S. Wilson and Grace M. Pollock Professorship for Excellence in English at the University of Washington, where he has taught for 33 years. He earned a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in journalism from Southern Illinois University and a PhD in philosophy from the State University of New York at Stony Brook. Dr. Johnson has written 17 books and more than 20 screenplays and numerous essays, articles, short stories, and literary reviews. He has also worked as an editor, cartoonist, and journalist, and has published more than 1,000 drawings in national publications. Dr. Johnson has received many awards and recognitions. When he won the 1990 National Book Award in Fiction for his novel Middle Passage, he was the first African-American male to win this prize since Ralph Allison in 1953. Dr. Johnson has received NEA and Guggenheim Fellowships, a Writers Guild Award for his PBS drama Booker, and numerous other prizes, honorary degrees, and awards, including a MacArthur Fellowship. Dr. Johnson is best known for combining philosophy and fiction. He writes complex, challenging novels that explore the most probing philosophical issues of our time. He challenges the assumptions and beliefs of his readers and refuses all simplifications of the complexity of American reality, whether in terms of race, gender, history, politics, or religion. Dr. Johnson has also made a great contribution to American culture by putting forth powerful and sometimes controversial ideas about the African American experience. He rejects the idea that there is a narrowly defined Black experience, positing that there are many ways to be Black in America, as many as there are African Americans. Dr. Johnson has gone so far as to say that race is an illusion, asserting that we all share a common humanity that unites apparent differences of race. The ultimate goal of Dr. Johnson's artistic quest is articulating the broader view of the human experience that transcends racial designations. For his innovative, hopeful, thought-provoking body of work, Washington and Lee University is proud to confer upon Charles Richard Johnson the Doctor of Humane Letters honoris causa.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters of Washington and Lee. Congratulations. Will the University Registrar escort Mr. Alexander Susong Jones to the front of the podium?
Alexander Susong Jones, author, broadcaster, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, is a Tennessee native. This fourth-generation journalist remains active in the ownership and management of his family's newspaper business, which has flourished since 1916. Jones graduated from Washington and Lee in 1968, following in the footsteps of his father, John M. Jones III, W&L class of 1937. From 1968 to 71, he served as an officer in the United States Navy. He began his journalism career at the Daily Post-Athenian in Athens, Tennessee, after which he joined the Greenville Sun, becoming editor in 1978. From 1983 to 92, he worked for the New York Times covering the press. In 1987, he received a Pulitzer Prize for his coverage of the collapse of the Bingham family's newspaper dynasty in Louisville, Kentucky. This work led to a new career as the author of books, starting with The Patriarch, The Rise and Fall of the Bingham Dynasty, co-authored with his wife, Susan Tift. Published in 1991, the book was named one of 10 best business books of the year by Businessweek magazine. Jones and Tift's second book, The Trust, The Private and Powerful Family Behind the New York Times, was published in 1999 and became a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award in biography. His new book, Losing the News, The Future of the News That Feeds Democracy, will be published by Oxford University Press in August. From 1993 to 97, Jones concentrated on his radio career. He hosted National Public Radio's On the Media, a live 2-hour program that examined all aspects of news coverage and media issues. He has also served as host and executive editor of PBS Media Matters. In 1998, he and Tift took on a joint venture in academia, a post as the Eugene C. Patterson Professor of the Practice of Journalism at Duke University. In 2000, Jones joined Harvard University, where he had held a Nieman Fellowship in 1981, joining Harvard then as the director of the Joan Shorenstein Center on the Press, Politics, and Public Policy at the John F. Kennedy School of Government. There, he is also the Lawrence M. Lombard Lecturer in the Press and Public Policy. Over the years, he has returned to Washington and Lee to share his experiences with the Department of Journalism and Mass Communications, and in 2007, he made a gift to the university to support 2 summer journalism interns for 3 years. In 2008, Washington and Lee recognized him with the Distinguished Alumnus Award. For his achievements, high principles, and sterling career as an award-winning journalist and author, Washington and Lee University is proud to confer upon alumnus Alexander Susong Jones the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters of Washington and Lee University. Congratulations. Will the University Registrar escort Ms. Susan Elizabeth Tift to the front of the platform?
It is fitting today that Washington and Lee honors an influential voice in media ethics, Susan Elizabeth Tift. We were, after all, one of the first universities to incorporate into our curriculum the academic study of journalism in society, emphasizing professional responsibility and journalistic integrity. We strive to view journalism, and indeed all of our disciplines, in the context of honor, personal integrity, and duty, and so does Susan Tift. Tift holds a bachelor's degree in English from Duke University and a master's degree in public administration from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. Duke selected her to speak for her class at her 1973 graduation, and as the first member of her alma mater's Young Trustee Program, she served on Duke's board. Tift embarked on her renowned and prolific career in journalism at Time magazine, where she worked as a national writer and associate editor from 1982 to 91. She has published hundreds of articles in widely ranging and widely read publications as Time, The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, Smithsonian Magazine, The Chicago Tribune, The Los Angeles Times, Glamour, and Working Woman, to name but a few. In 1999, Tift co-authored with her husband, Alex Jones, the best-selling and award-winning book, The Trust, the Private and Powerful Family Behind the New York Times. It is, in itself, a mammoth work of journalism that illuminates the role and the power of that newspaper and the ethical implications of the many complicated decisions involved in daily journalism. Her first biography, also co-authored with Jones, was The Patriarch, The Rise and Fall of the Bingham Dynasty, an acclaimed account of the family behind the Louisville, Kentucky newspapers. Today, Tift is the Eugene C. Patterson Professor of the Practice of Journalism and Public Policy Studies at Duke University. She recently received the ultimate tribute from Duke, which created the Susan Tift Undergraduate Teaching Mentoring Award. The university will give it each year to the person who best embodies Susan Tift's gift and passion for teaching. In our society's understanding of how to parse the ever-increasing flow of information through news outlets, Tift is an important voice. She brings to her readers remarkable insight into print and broadcast journalism and a profound understanding of the media, their owners, and the influences that shape them. William Asher, former director of the Sanford Institute of Public Policy at Duke, described Tift as among the few practicing journalists who are exploring the role of media in the policymaking process and the ethical responsibilities of journalists. For her leadership, high attainments, and moral influence in the profession of journalism, Washington & Lee is proud to confer upon Susan Elizabeth Tift the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters of Washington & Lee University. Congratulations. We congratulate all the recipients of our honorary degrees, and we are pleased that we were able to help Dr. Johnson, who hails from the Pacific Northwest, feel right at home.